This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. The billionaire founder of South Korean internet company Kakao arrested for alleged stock rigging during the takeover of a leading K-pop agency. Now, Taiwan forced to scale back its annual Han Kuang military drills designed to mimic a possible Chinese invasion on safety concerns as a powerful typhoon bears down. And that same typhoon, dubbed Gaemi, is also set to slam into southern Zhejiang and northern Fujian this week, while China is already making preparations. China also announcing the reconciliation of more than a dozen Palestinian factions in Beijing, potentially paving the way for an interim unity government in post-war Gaza. Ahead on East Asia tonight, Ukraine's foreign minister is in China on a 4-day trip for talks on ending Russia's invasion. It's his first trip to Beijing since the conflict began, and we'll have an expert weigh in on what can be achieved. And we dive into a flashpoint site in the territorial spat between China and the Philippines, a World War II-era vessel that Manila grounded years ago at the Second Thomas Shoal. A K-pop bidding war gone wrong for one of South Korea's most celebrated tech entrepreneurs. Well, Roland Lim from CNA's Business Desk, he joins us now to elaborate a little bit more. Roland?
Thanks, Oteli. Well, it's troubling, as some analysts might say. A district court in Seoul issued an arrest warrant for Kim Beom-su, who allegedly for stock manipulation when Kakao bought SM Entertainment last year. The 58-year-old could be the most prominent business figure in South Korea to land in jail in years. Now, Korean authorities said that Mr. Kim was a flight risk who could destroy evidence. The case stems from Kakao's takeover of one of the country's biggest music labels, that's SM Entertainment, last year, after a high-profile bidding war with HYBE, that's the agency of K-pop super band BTS. Financial regulators have accused Kakao executives of buying more than $170 million worth of SM shares to disrupt HYBE's offer. Both Mr. Kim and Kakao Corp have denied the allegations. The company currently ranks as South Korea's 15th biggest conglomerate by assets. It operates the popular messaging service Kakao Talk. It also has expanded in services to include online banking, shopping, gaming, and ride-hailing as well. The shares in Seoul tanking more than 5% for the day, in contrast with a 0.4% gain in the benchmark Kospi. Now, for more on this, CNA's Lim Yon-suk joins us live from Seoul. Yon-suk, good to have you with us. Now, Kim Beom-su is one of the country's most celebrated internet entrepreneurs. How big of a surprise was his arrest?
Well, Roland, I think Koreans here were aware that he was being investigated, but I think many here were surprised, very surprised to hear that he was arrested so quickly and that the Seoul court here found him, approved that arrest warrant amid concerns that he could flee the country or destroy the evidence, because we're talking about a company, Kakao, which is very popular here among South Koreans, the general public here. Now, as you said, Kakao Talk, the messaging app, is installed on more than 90% of the phones here. And so there is a lot of interest about what happens to Kakao, and especially among the younger South Koreans. It is one of the companies many young South Koreans say they would like to work for. And in fact, it was the company, the number one company that young South Koreans preferred to work for, both in 2020 and 2021. There was a survey conducted during those 2 years among more than 1,000 people, and they all said that it was Kakao they wanted to, because usually it was, it'll be Samsung, but during those 2 years, it was Kakao. But I think this incident seems to have already hurt its image, especially among the younger South Koreans, who also say that, perhaps Kakao should stop expanding further, but focus on more on what it has. So let me share with you, Roland, some of the things that the people had to say today.
목표 꿈이었어요. 그냥 원래 제가 진로도 그쪽이기도 해가지고 그래서 카카오톡에 원래 관심이 좀 있었는데 이번에 터져가지고 그래서 다른 회사 쪽으로 많이 틀긴 했어요.
앞으로 계속 이런 사태가 하면은 의장직에서 물러나지 않는 이상 경영 방식을 조금 바꿔야 되지 않을까, 지금보다는. 좀 더 일단 문어발식 경영부터 일단 좀 다르게 하고 좀 지금 기존에 있는 것부터 먼저 좀 잘 해야 되지 않을까.
And I think, whether the CEO is charged or not, I think its image, the Kakao image, has already been tarnished due to this incident, especially among the younger South Koreans here.
Yoon-suk, on the management side of things, what about concerns of a leadership vacuum? I mean, what impact could the arrest have on Kakao's stability and expansion plans in areas such as artificial intelligence?
Well, talking to some of the analysts here, they say, here in South Korea, usually if the CEO is behind bars and not able to manage the company, then the analysts saying that it's definitely going to slow down its businesses, which means that Kakao will have to face difficulties or delay expanding its businesses, like going into that AI business, which it was planning to do sometime later this year. Because here, we do say that it's usually the CEO who makes all the decisions, and Kakao has more than 100 affiliates. And it's not just the AI expansion for Kakao, but if the CEO, Kim Beom-su, is found guilty, then it is very possible that the company Kakao Corp could also face criminal charges under the Korean law. And that means that Kakao Corp, which also holds about 27% stake in Kakao Bank, might have to sell all but 10% of its holdings and lose its majority shareholder status. So if Kim Beom-su is found guilty, then many analysts here are saying right now, it seems to be a very uncertain future for Kakao.
So I guess it begs the next question, which is, now that Kim has been arrested, what's likely to happen to him next?
Well, Roland, prosecutors now have about 20 days to find more evidence against him and investigate this case if they want to bring charges against him. But we are getting reports today that the prosecutors were not able to question him because he didn't turn up for a hearing, citing health reasons. Now, Kim Beom-su hasn't been formally charged, and the Kakao and himself have denied those allegations. And in fact, during a company meeting last week, he was cited by the local reports here as saying that he never instructed or condoned any illegal acts. So we'll have to wait and see whether the prosecutors will be able to bring charges against him within those 20 days. And, even once the trial starts, many analysts here are saying that it could be another 2 to 3 years before we see the final verdict. And so this is going to go on, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest among South Koreans to see what happens to this company.
Yoon-suk, thank you for those updates. That was Lim Yoon-suk reporting live from Seoul. And I'll be back a little later on with more business news. We'll tell you, back to you.
Looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Roland. Now, on to Taiwan next, where the island has cut back on some drills in its annual war games amid adverse weather conditions from Typhoon Gaemi. Well, the Han Kuang military exercise that began yesterday was meant to be a 5-day unscripted mega event, and it aims to resemble actual combat and assess the island's capacity to tackle a full-scale attack. Well, in light of the approaching storm that's due to make landfall tomorrow, Taiwan has cancelled air defense drills in the city of Hualien.
目前，东部地区受到台风的影响是比较明显，所以有一些海空的科目啊，我们也会配合整个台风的状况来去做一些调整。
Sirens bled in Taipei, with people ordered to stay indoors as an annual air raid exercise across Taiwan takes place concurrently with the Han Kuang military drills. Named Wan-an, or Everlasting Peace, the mandatory street evacuation exercise saw towns and cities across northern Taiwan shut down for 30 minutes. And for more on this, CNA's Victoria Jen, she joins us live now from Taipei. Victoria, as we've mentioned, Taiwan has cancelled some of these drills in its large-scale war exercises. Tell us more about the rationale behind that decision. Anything in particular that officials are concerned with?
It's clearly the poor weather condition. Now, we were at Hualien military base this morning to attend the military exercises featuring fighter jets. But we were told that the exercises were canceled only half an hour before they were to begin. And also the authorities canceled our trip to offshore offshore island Penghu, where a live-fired drill was scheduled to take place on Wednesday. And now the reason a military official said that they cited the poor weather conditions to be the reason for the cancellation, and but it came as a real surprise to many of us, and some questions why is the knowing that there is going to be a typhoon, and why did they make the decision such a last minute? But the military, however, still managed to actually carry out some drills, such as rescuing the wounded soldiers as well as clearing the runways. Now, the President William Lai was also in Hualien for inspection, but unlike his predecessor, Tsai Ing-wen, he did not give a speech, or did he speak to the press. Meantime, other military drills are being conducted around the island. For instance, the Wan'an air raid took place as scheduled. An alert was sent via mobile phone telling people to immediately seek shelter to simulate a possible attack from China. But some adjustment is likely to be made depending on the typhoon.
Now, Victoria, also run us through this Han Kuang exercise this year. What's particularly significant about it?
Well, it's the first military exercise since President William Lai took office in May. If you recall, shortly after he took office, China launched a 2-day military exercises around the island and calling them a strong punishment against separatist act. Beijing viewed William Lai as a separatist for his hardline pro-independence position. So the drills basically is a proof and to demonstrate that Taiwan's determination to defend itself against a military threat from China. Now, this year's Han Kuang military exercises are all unscripted for the first time since the military exercises began back in 1984. So basically, it is to test the combat readiness of the troops, and at the same time, another new feature that has added to this year's military exercises is the simulation of the disruption of communications between the command center and also the troops, and the purpose is to test the troops to be able to act independently, to operate independently based on the rule of engagement. Now, I spoke to some of the analysts, and here is what they have to say.
就是以往你会有这种 situation A to Z 那部队都知道了可能会有什么状况。那这一次这些 situation 全部都没有公布，所以部队它是随机 random 的接受一个就是测试，来知道说我还有哪些要改进的。
今天的防守部队，你要去学习的是你要如何去运用你现在的知识，运用你现在的部队的能力来去进行攻击、进行反击。那会变成说你跟中央这边的一个联系上面，除了如果今天没有办法联系的话，那你也要知道你能做到什么这样的事情。
But to keep in mind that China's military spending is 12 times that of Taiwan. So in the event of a war, that how Taiwan can increase its combat readiness to buy more time to allow reinforcement to arrive Taiwan will be Taiwan's main task.
Well, thanks, Victoria, for covering those drills for us. I know you've been up very early to do this. So Victoria Jen there, reporting to us live from Taipei. Typhoon Gaemi, meantime, is gaining strength as it churns through the warm waters of the Philippine Sea. Residents in Taiwan's northeastern coast are rushing to prepare for the storm's arrival. Boats are being secured in fishing ports ahead of forecasted strong winds and torrential rain. Gaemi, which is expected to strengthen to a severe typhoon, will likely make landfall on the island between late Wednesday and early Thursday. Once it barrels through northern Taiwan, it is expected to slam into China's southern Zhejiang and northern Fujian provinces later this week. China are also bracing for Gaemi's approach. Met agencies are warning of waves that could reach 6 meters high in coastal areas and up to 9 meters further out in the East China Sea and Taiwan Strait, potentially triggering a red weather alert, which is the highest of a 4-tier warning system.
目前来看呢，也可能是今年到现在为止，应该是个影响非常严重的一个台风。尤其要提醒呢，目前是正值暑期，那么沿海旅游的人员呢是比较多的。那么也提醒公众人员呢，一定要及时关注海洋预警报信息，提前规避这些危险海域，避免因海况恶劣，难以施救造成人员伤亡的一个情况。
Time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China and Russia defend their cooperation in the Arctic after the U.S. expressed concern that their actions could affect regional stability. And top executives of a Japanese dietary supplement maker resign after 80 people died, potentially from taking their pills. Japan has finally located the wreckage of 2 Navy helicopters that collided more than 3 months ago. Well, that incident killed 8 crew members. The choppers were identified by their serial numbers and other distinctive markings. Well, the 2 SH-60K helicopters collided during an anti-submarine nighttime drill off the Izu Islands in the Pacific Ocean. Each aircraft carried 4 members. The Navy confirmed 1 was dead shortly after the incident, while the remaining 7 were declared dead in June, with search efforts for their bodies continuing. Well, the discovery of both aircraft on the seabed near the crash site came during an unmanned deep-sea probe by a National Research Institute this month. The Navy says it will consider the possibility of pulling up the wreckage to further the investigation. Previously, the Defense Ministry reported that the 2 aircraft didn't attempt to avoid each other until the collision. Well, the crew had failed to keep a proper lookout and may have misjudged their distance. Now, in April last year, a Japanese Army helicopter with 10 people aboard crashed off Miyako Island in southern Okinawa with no survivors. China has defended its Arctic policy after Washington issued a warning saying that climate change had resulted in increased activity between China and Russia.
中国是北极事务的重要利益攸关方，我们一贯本着尊重、合作、共赢、可持续的基本原则参与北极事务，与各方加强合作，致力于维护北极的和平稳定，促进北极的可持续发展。
The Pentagon made the claims in its 2024 Arctic strategy, highlighting that rapidly warming temperatures and thinning ice coverage is enabling Beijing to increase commercial and military cooperation in the area.
Melting Arctic ice caps are opening new shipping lanes and attracting increased interest and activity from both the People's Republic of China and Russia. While not an Arctic state, the PRC seeks greater influence in the region, greater access to the region, and a greater say in its governance.
The Kremlin also responded to the U.S., saying that Russian cooperation with China in the Arctic is not aimed against anyone. China has expanded its activity in the region in recent years, contributing more money into exploration and research. Russia, meantime, has boosted its military presence, reopening and improving military bases and airfields. The fast-changing effects of climate change in the Arctic, including the melting of polar ice, has resulted in nations vying for oil, gas and mineral deposits in an area with a network of complex territorial claims. And as promised, we have more business news from Roland Lim. So, Roland, Nippon Steel, they are looking to end a, 2-decade joint venture with China's Bao Steel?
That's right, Otelli. And that's largely due to the rising influence and dominance of Chinese electric vehicle makers. Now, as Japanese automakers struggle in China, they are buying less from Nippon Steel. Ending the joint venture with Bao's Shan Iron and Steel will slash Nippon Steel's production capacity in China by some 70%. The 50-50 joint venture with the Chinese steelmaker was established back in 2004. Nippon Steel decided to end the contract when its 20-year period expires this summer. It's planning to sell its shares in the joint venture BNA to Bao Steel. Now, this could be worth several hundred millions of dollars. BNA can produce some 2.62 million tons of steel a year. It has been plating steel imported from Japan and supplying it to the Chinese plants of Japanese automakers. Now, both parties benefit. Nippon Steel expanded its Chinese business, while Bao Steel acquired technology that was not available in China then. However, the shift to electric vehicles in China has been rapidly expanding the market share of local car makers. From January through to June, the three major Japanese automakers, that's Toyota, Nissan and Honda, sold 1.54 million vehicles in China, and that's down 13% on year. It also marks the third consecutive year of decline. The top two executives of a major Japanese dietary supplement maker, Kobayashi, has announced their resignation amid ongoing investigations into dozens of deaths potentially linked to its tablets. An external report says that the firm had failed to prioritize consumer safety and acted with what it deems to be an, quote, insufficient sense of urgency. Now, Kobayashi Pharmaceuticals is at the center of a health scare involving its over-the-counter tablets containing red yeast rice. Now, the firm earlier said this year recalled some 3 brands of dietary supplements after customers complained of kidney problems. Red yeast rice, also known as beni koji, has been used in food, alcoholic drinks and folk medicine for centuries around East Asia. Now, experts say it can improve cholesterol levels, but warned of a risk of organ damage depending on the ingredient's chemical makeup. Kobayashi shares closing out the day in the red by more than 1% today. Now, TikTok is reportedly making a renewed push to expand its business in Europe after a hiatus. A Bloomberg report citing sources says it is gearing up to launch its in-app shopping platform in Spain and Ireland as early as October. A parent company, ByteDance, is also said to have informed its partners to be prepared for a TikTok Shop debut in the 2 European cities. Now, TikTok Shop is, of course, the app's fastest growing feature, which combines video content with an impulse buy in a visual fashion. Now, a team of some 40 people have reportedly been recruited by TikTok Shop in Spain, making it one of the country's biggest e-commerce outposts in the region. Now, the expansion was delayed earlier as the company had intended to focus on the US, which remains TikTok's most important market, with some 170 million users monthly. The rollout, however, is expected to be smaller than previously envisioned. Analysts believe the company is seeking to widen its reach without attracting further scrutiny from European authorities. Now, the EU's General Court earlier ruled that the Chinese social media platform will not be able to evade a new law which reins in big tech firms. Regulators are also investigating whether TikTok has created potentially harmful features for children. Meanwhile, preparations to expand the business to other parts of Europe next year also underway. Quick check on the rest of East Asian markets. Some of them are under pressure. Greater China stocks down today as consumer sentiment remained weak after a key leadership gathering last week. Investors struggled after a surprise move yesterday by the Chinese Central Bank to trim a string of interest rates. The Shanghai Composite ending the day 1.65% lower. Shenzhen Component, the second bourse, is worse off, nearly 3% in the red. Meantime, the benchmark Hang Seng Index also 1% in the red. Japan's Nikkei 225 ended marginally lower on Tuesday, extending its loss for a 5th consecutive session. That's as caution of a strengthening yen overshadowing gains in chip counters. And that is the latest in business. It's back to you, Telly.
Thanks so much for that, Roland. Well, time now for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China hails the reconciliation of more than a dozen Palestinian factions that includes a commitment to set up a government for post-war Gaza. Plus, Ukraine's top diplomat visits Russia's no-limit ally, China, seeking a way to achieve a sustainable and just peace. The billionaire founder of South Korean internet company Kakao arrested for alleged stock manipulation during the takeover of a leading K-pop agency. Taiwan forced to scale back its annual Han Kuang military drills designed to mimic a possible Chinese invasion on safety concerns as a powerful typhoon bears down. And residents in Taiwan and China brace for the arrival of that same typhoon. Named Gaemi, the storm is now gaining strength. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to Asia this week to deepen ties with Washington's strategic allies. Well, the U.S. is seeking to bolster its regional stance against an increasingly assertive China and to assure its allies of continued American support despite domestic political uncertainties. Well, the 10-day tour will see Mr. Blinken visit Vietnam, Laos, Japan, the Philippines, Singapore, and Mongolia. Mr. Blinken will attend the funeral of Vietnam's late communist leader Nguyen Phu Trong, as well as participate in an ASEAN foreign ministers meeting in Laos. Now, he is also expected to meet his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on the sidelines of the ASEAN event. Now, the U.S. has significantly raised its engagement with several countries in the region in recent years, and many are locked in territorial disputes with Beijing over the South China Sea. On Monday, Washington welcomed efforts by the Philippines and China to ease tensions. Both agreed to a provisional arrangement for resupplying Filipino troops stationed on a shoal that has been a flashpoint in recent months. The matter will likely top the agenda when Mr. Blinken meets his Filipino counterpart in Manila this week. A Chinese state media reports that over a dozen Palestinian factions have signed the Beijing Declaration, agreeing to end their divisions. It highlights a commitment to establish an interim national reconciliation government for a post-war Gaza. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi hailed the deal, adding that reconciliation is an internal matter for the Palestinian groups. But he also noted that it cannot be achieved without support of the international community. A total of 14 Palestinian factions were involved, including the leaders of rival groups Hamas and Fatah. The two have been bitter rivals since deadly clashes following Hamas's victory in a 2006 election. The militant group has ruled Gaza since seizing control in 2007. Fatah, on the other hand, controls the Palestinian Authority, which has partial administrative control in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. And staying in China, Ukraine's foreign minister will be in Beijing from today at China's invitation to discuss how to end Russia's invasion and what role the Chinese could play in a settlement. Dmytro Kuleba is often seen with Kyiv's Western allies, but this will be his first trip to Beijing since Russia's full-scale invasion 2.5 years ago. Well, the trip is unusual as China has a so-called no-limits partnership with the Kremlin. Beijing did not attend Kyiv's peace summit in Switzerland last month because Moscow was not invited. But Ukraine is hoping to hold another summit in November that would include Russia. Right, for more, let's bring in Min Ran Liu, lecturer on international and political studies at the University of New South Wales. Thanks, Dr. Liu, for joining us on East Asia tonight. First up, as mentioned, we talked about how, China talks about supporting peace efforts, and yet it snubbed Ukraine's peace summit in Switzerland, and it got called out by Zelensky for allegedly colluding with Russia. So, Dr. Liu, help us understand then, what is behind China's renewed interest in engaging with Ukraine?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I believe the communicative channel has always been there. So Kiev has always been seeking, especially to improve, to sustain communication with Beijing ever since the war broke out, given Beijing's importance. And also Ukraine's foreign minister and Chinese foreign minister actually met very recently in February. China's vice foreign minister and Ukraine's first deputy foreign minister actually met last month in Beijing as well. And I believe, obviously, Beijing did not attend the peace summit in Switzerland, although there were about more than 100 delegations in the summit from many nations and international organizations. But Russia was not there, as you said, because from China's perspective, any actions perceived to be siding with Kiev or even worth to be siding with the West will undermine its relationship with Russia. China believe Russia is the most important strategic partner, given the long-term competition between China and the US. And given the fact that China believes Russia plays a very important role in an ideal world where China plays a more important role, in that world. So China said the participation of both Russia and Ukraine was prerequisite for meaningful peace talk. But this event is completely different because this is not an event. This is not a Ukraine-led peace talk. It is actually a Beijing-led peace process. I think that's the main difference.
So, Dr. Liu, help us. What are some of the specific topics do you expect to be discussed during the talks? And also, what are the potential areas of agreement or tension between Ukraine and China?
I think obviously the problem of Ukraine's territory, the loss of territory during the war, is one of the most important things to be discussed. If you look at Ukraine's domestic rhetoric, if you think about even Zelensky's mandate to rule and the identity of this country, obviously all of these things are closely linked to Ukraine's territory integrity and sovereignty. So certainly it will be one of the most important topics to be discussed. I think another topic would be Ukraine's NATO membership, because I believe any meaningful peace settlements, peace talks need to be taken into consideration Ukraine's potential NATO membership. If we don't discuss this point, then peace can be very difficult to achieve. Even if there's a peace, it cannot be sustained. So the loss of territory, Ukraine's loss of territory, and Ukraine's NATO membership will be, I believe, the most important topics.
Well, thanks for highlighting that. So those are the topics we can certainly look out for. But let's talk about, China, they did unveil this peace plan, right, for Ukraine and Russia. But, some critics say that it has fallen flat. So, except for Russia, that is. But why would it be in Beijing's interest to urge Moscow to end its war against Kyiv?
I believe Beijing has always been between a rock and a very hard place. It is a dilemma for Beijing. Beijing has been very uncomfortable. On the one hand, China sees the importance of Sino-Russo relationship beyond the war itself. Russia is important geopolitically. Its relationship with Beijing provides support for China in the future competition with the United States and with the West, very importantly. However, Beijing is uncomfortable with Russia's blatant invasion of Ukraine, of a sovereign country. It is very awkward for Beijing because Beijing is often being seen as the high priest of the idea of sovereignty, of the idea of territory integrity, which is very important for China itself. If you think about Beijing's relationship with Taiwan, for example, China would find any perceived endorsement of Russia's action as bad for its reputation. Also, not to mention the risks becoming the target of sanctions and China's extensive economic relationship with the United States and the European Union, and to a less extent with Ukraine as well.
And Dr. Liu, given the current situation, do you think Ukraine will be inclined to accept peace and stability, even if it comes at the loss of its territory?
I don't think so. I believe it is almost impossible for Ukraine to accept peace and stability that comes at the loss of its territory. If you think about the current domestic rhetoric in Ukraine, if you think about the loss during the war, what Ukraine has suffered, if you think about the country's identity, very difficult. Even Zelensky himself, his mandate to rule, all of these things are very, very closely connected to Ukraine's territory integrity. I don't think in the short run Ukraine will be inclined to accept peace and stability comes at the loss of its territory. Very difficult.
It's been great speaking with you, and thanks for sharing your insights with us. Min Ran Liu, lecturer on international and political studies at the University of New South Wales. China and the Philippines may have agreed to boost communication channels that can be used to resolve maritime spats and de-escalate the situation in South China Sea. But experts that CNA spoke to say that the situation remains volatile, and that's due to a Philippine-grounded World War II-era ship, the BRP Sierra Madre. Well, CNA's documentary, When Titans Clash, looks into the reasons behind the confrontations over this vessel.
This is the ship at the center of the conflict, the Sierra Madre, a decrepit vessel of World War II vintage, grounded on the Second Thomas Shoal. This is the ship the Philippines is constantly sending supplies to, which the Chinese are trying to stop. It was deliberately anchored here by the Philippines in 1999 to bolster the country's territorial claims in the disputed South China Sea.
Pag may-ari natin at kami inatasan dito na magbantay, handa rin kami na ano man ang mangyari sa buhay namin ay natatanggap na namin.
Why is the Second Thomas Shoal so strategic?
On the Philippine side, it's very near the Palawan landmass. And therefore, for example, if China is able to assert physical presence on the Second Thomas Shoal, they'll be very close, around 100 miles from the Philippine mainland of Palawan. On the other hand, for China also, this is quite important because the Second Thomas Shoal belongs to a key sea lane, the Palawan Strait. And therefore, I think being able to control the Second Thomas Shoal would grant China more of a foothold, a maritime foothold in the South China Sea, and therefore, I think, really assert their 10-dash line.
The Sierra Madre has been parked there for 25 years. How was this issue resolved before?
Well, I think there was a kind of a mutual understanding, especially with the Duterte government. So we have been allowing this kind of a provision of daily necessities, like food and water, to those soldiers, because there is a general understanding between China and ASEAN countries that we should resolve all the issues between us peacefully.
So why do you think there has been an escalation over the last 2 years?
I think that is because the ship is become more and more rusted, and the Filipino government has decided to do something to fortify the ship. And this is not something that we would allow, because actually I believe we have been quite kind to them. Otherwise, how can the soldiers stay on the ship for 25 years?
If BRP Sierra Madre collapses, then there's a significant decision point for the Philippine government. And there are many scenarios. Among them would be to anchor another ship. Certain suggestions were even including not to wait for it to collapse, but to already build some installations, occupy it, just like what China and other claimants in the South China Sea has done to the features in the South China Sea.
If the ship falls apart, then China can immediately occupy the reef. This is obviously unacceptable to the Philippines. The most likely scenario is what you saw in 1988 between China and Vietnam at Johnson Reef, in which you had a sharp, short naval battle because both China and Vietnam simultaneously tried to reoccupy that feature. No Philippine government could accept the loss of Second Thomas Shoal. So there will be a huge compulsion for any Philippine government to prevent a Chinese occupation. That's far more dangerous than the situation we have now with these resupplies. And I think the Marcos government correctly calculated 2 years ago that even though it would be risky to bring in supplies and shore up the ship, that would ultimately be less risky than the alternative. The U.S. would be just as obligated to defend Filipino personnel and vessels in that scenario as it is now.
Given climate change and how storms are becoming more intense and more frequent, the Sierra Madre could break any day now.
That's right. This is what makes the South China Sea in general, and Second Thomas Shoal in particular, is so dangerous. We could all wake up tomorrow to a crisis that none of us saw coming. Everybody worries about Taiwan, and we should be worried about Taiwan. But it's very unlikely that a crisis in Taiwan takes us by surprise. We'll see it coming months in advance. The South China Sea, you might not.
If you find this fascinating, you can catch When Titans Clash tonight at 9 p.m. on CNA. And you can also watch it online, of course, on a CNA Video On Demand or Me Watch. On that note, it's time to go for a short break. But coming up next on East Asia Tonight, 1 week since 6 people were found dead in a luxury Bangkok hotel room, we talk to a grieving mother who's looking for answers. Here is a story outside of East Asia that we are tracking. In Myanmar, military chief Min Aung Hlaing will take on the role of acting president after Vice President Min Sue was put on medical leave. Our reports say the former acting president is suffering from a neurological disorder that limits his daily functions and that he has been receiving medical treatment since early this year. Min Sue was vice president under Aung San Suu Kyi's democratically elected government. He was later appointed acting president after the 2021 military coup, though the position is seen as a figurehead role. Now, acting president duties have now been transferred to the army chief, who had also previously appointed himself as Myanmar's prime minister. With the added portfolio, Min Aung Hlaing will now have the power to call for high-level meetings relating to national security. And this would include decisions on extending the state of emergency in the country that's due to expire by the end of this month. And Leung Wai-kit tells us more about what it means for the army chief to assume the role of acting president, especially amid Myanmar's ongoing crisis.
Two things are very clear immediately. One, this is a consolidation of power by Min Aung Hlaing, and two, things are starting to pick up pace in terms of transition or transformation of the country moving forward. Truth be told, the role of president or acting president isn't that important in a crisis or in a state of emergency in Myanmar because the Myanmar army has made sure of it. In 2008, when they rewrote the constitution, it ensured that this highest level body that decides on matters of emergency, where Min Aung Hlaing is a part of, can function even without a president or acting president. So the very fact that he has gone through this whole process of renaming an acting president tells me two things. One, he has trust issues. No one else he trusts that can take up this role. And two, he effectively wants to portray to the world that he's going by the law, he's going by the book, and he wants to portray that he's legitimate. But most significantly, this could be a situation where Min Aung Hlaing can have his cake and eat it too. Because not too long ago, remember, I talked about how former President Thein Sein had visited Beijing, where he met Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Now, sources told me that back then, during that meeting, Wang Yi had told Thein Sein to go back to Myanmar, convey to the Myanmar army to hand over power, form some form of interim government that will pave the way for elections. Now, we don't know for now whether or not this acting president role is any form of interim government, but this does not go against the wishes or hopes of Beijing, which has, like I said, conveyed this message through the Myanmar army via former President Thein Sein.
Well, it's been a week since 6 foreigners were found dead in a hotel room at Bangkok's Grand Hyatt Erawan. And there's still no official conclusion on what happened, though Thai police have found cyanide in the room, indicating possible death by poisoning. CNA's Tong No spoke to the mother of one of the victims.
In Vietnam's Da Nang City, funeral service is underway for Trần Đình Phú, the 36-year-old makeup artist who was one of the 6 people found dead at the luxury hotel in Bangkok last Tuesday.
Mà cô lâu lâu cô ngồi đi mà cô nghe tiếng mở cửa ra là cô nghĩ là Phú đi làm về, chứ cô vẫn không nghĩ là con cô mất rồi. Cô không nghĩ mà chuyện đi này con đi thật rồi Phú ơi. Nghìn thu không bao giờ mẹ gặp lại con nữa.
Police found the lethal substance, cyanide, in the hotel room where the 6 people died. And they suspect one of the 6, Shirin Chong, was the one who put the cyanide in the cups where it was found. According to Mr. Fu's mom and a close friend of his, Shirin Chong had been a special client of her son for the past 1 year. They say Mr. Fu told them that Miss Chong had presented herself as the wife of a billionaire.
Anh Phú có tâm sự với em là đợt vừa rồi anh hay make up cho vợ của tỷ phú Dubai. Rồi anh cũng có cho em xem hình của cái chị đó. Rồi anh cũng khoe là đấy anh đi làm được chị đó trả lương cao. Một lần như vậy là được 5.000 đô. Anh còn kể với em là đi Hồng Kông rồi đi tất cả các nước nữa chứ không phải một mình nước Thái đâu ạ. Anh Phú kể cho em là chị ấy rất là kỹ tính. Trước khi mà chị ấy book anh Phú make up á, là chị ấy đã phải xem thầy. Tại vì chị ấy theo một cái người thầy đó là ở Hồng Kông. Thì trước khi mà book anh Phú là chị ấy có hỏi ý kiến của thầy. Thì khi mà thầy xem phong thủy cho chị đấy á, thì bảo là anh Phú rất là hợp với chị. Thì chị ấy mới book anh Phú.
The family say they still have questions about what happened.
Nhưng mà em cũng đang thắc mắc là không hiểu lý do vì sao mà bà có thể mời một lúc 6 người uống trà và uống cà phê, trong đó là anh Phú không bao giờ uống trà và uống cà phê luôn.
Phú là không uống trà, không uống rượu, không uống bia. Mà giữa cái mang nữa là có một cái trái nước suối. Mà Phú là đi qua nước ngoài là Phú muốn nước suối, Phú từ vàng nắp Phú uống thôi. Bằng ác nhân đưa vào trong trái nước suối.
The family say they themselves will look for answers to what really happened to their son.
Mà cô buồn, cô đau lòng. Cô không hiểu vì sao mà tụi làm ăn với nhau hoặc là có cái chuyện chi thì cô làm với chi mình chết. Họ nói là bị đau độc, cô nói là con cô có làm chi mà đau độc.
But their priority now is to cope with the shock and pain and arrange for their final goodbye to their loved one. Tùng Ngô, CNA, Đà Nẵng.
And that's all we have for you in East Asia tonight, this Tuesday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia and CNA 938 Radio. Thanks for your company.